The tank was already burning. Smoke rose steadily from the engine compartment, dark against the winter sky. Most crews would have abandoned it immediately. There was no reason to stay. The position had collapsed. Infantry units had pulled back. The field ahead was exposed. Audie Murphy did not retreat with them. He climbed onto the tank instead. The metal was hot beneath his boots. Flames licked at the sides, uneven and unpredictable. The radio inside no longer worked. The engine was dead. From a distance, the tank looked finished. Useless. Murphy stood alone on top of it. Ahead of him, German infantry advanced across the open ground. They moved carefully at first, then with more confidence. There was no immediate exchange of fire. No barrage. Just movement. Murphy did not shout orders. There was no one left to receive them. He reached for the machine gun mounted on the tank. It was still operational. For a moment, nothing happened. Then he opened fire. The sound cut through the field sharply. Unexpected. German soldiers dropped to the ground. Some froze. Others scattered. Murphy did not move from his position. He remained standing on a burning vehicle, alone, drawing fire toward himself. For the next 5 minutes, the field belonged to him. Later, reports would describe what happened there. They would reduce it to numbers and actions. But at that moment, there was no awareness of significance. Only heat, noise, and time moving forward. The position had been unstable long before the tank caught fire. The ground offered little cover. A thin line of trees marked the edge of the field, but beyond that, everything was exposed. Murphy's unit had been holding the area under increasing pressure. German forces were moving forward methodically, testing the line, looking for weakness. When the tank was hit, it was not a dramatic moment. There was no explosion that changed the course of the battle. The engine stopped. Smoke followed. The tank was no longer useful. Orders were given to fall back. Infantry units began to withdraw towards safer ground. This was not a rout. It was controlled movement. Murphy helped coordinate the retreat at first. He directed men away from the open field, toward cover. As the last of them pulled back, the space around the tank emptied. The field became quiet again. But only briefly. German infantry began to advance with more confidence. They had seen the withdrawal. They assumed the position was abandoned. From their perspective, the burning tank confirmed it. Murphy did not leave. He understood what the tank still represented. Not as armor. Not as protection, but as elevation. From the top of the vehicle, he could see the field clearly. Movement, spacing, approach routes. He also understood the risk. The tank was an obvious target. Smoke marked it from a distance. Any return fire would come quickly. Staying there meant accepting attention. Murphy chose to stay. He was not thinking in terms of heroism. There was no plan beyond delay. Every second the enemy hesitated was time for his unit to regroup. The burning tank was no longer equipment. It had become a signal. A signal that the position was not empty. Not yet. Murphy did not hesitate for long. There was no discussion. No signal exchanged. The tank was already burning when he reached it. Heat radiated unevenly from the metal. He climbed up carefully. Not quickly. Not dramatically. The surface was unstable. Smoke reduced visibility. Inside the tank, the crew was gone. The vehicle had been written off. Murphy did not enter it. He stayed on top. The mounted machine gun was still usable. A simple fact. He checked the belt feed once. That was enough. From this position, the field opened up. What had been hidden from ground level became visible. German infantry were closer now, moving in small groups, using the terrain as best they could. They did not expect resistance from the tank. The smoke suggested abandonment. Fire suggested failure. Murphy understood what the enemy would assume, and what they would not. He took position behind the machine gun. Exposed. There was no cover on the tank. Only height. The sound of approaching movement grew clearer. Boots on frozen ground. Equipment shifting. Murphy waited. He did not fire immediately. The moment was not yet right. He allowed the distance to close. Allowed confidence to build. From the ground. The tank still looked empty. Then he opened fire. The first burst of fire broke the advance. German soldiers dropped instinctively. Some scattered toward shallow cover. Others froze, unsure of the source. The sound came from above. From the tank they had already dismissed. Murphy remained standing. The machine gun vibrated under his hands. The recoil was steady, familiar. Smoke thickened around him, partially obscuring the field, partially exposing his position. Return fire came quickly. Rifle shots cracked across the open ground. Bullets struck the tank's armor, sharp and metallic. Murphy did not climb down. He adjusted his aim slowly, deliberately. This was not suppression fire meant to intimidate. Each burst was controlled, directed. The advancing infantry slowed. Movement became cautious again. Progress stalled. For the men on the ground, the tank had become something else. Not cover. Not wreckage. A fixed point of resistance. Murphy could feel the heat beneath him intensifying. The metal grew hotter with each passing moment. Flames flared briefly, then receded. The fire was unpredictable. At any moment, the tank could ignite further. There was no way to know. He continued firing. The machine gun belt fed smoothly. The rhythm remained constant. Shots aimed at the tank increased in frequency. The position was fully exposed now. Murphy did not seek shelter. There was none. Time stretched. 5 minutes does not sound long. But under fire, it expands. Each second required attention. Each movement was deliberate. Murphy was hit. Shrapnel tore through the air around him. Fragments struck his legs and arms. He did not leave his position. Pain registered distantly. It did not alter his actions. From the field, German infantry hesitated again. The advance lost cohesion. Orders could not be heard clearly. Signals were unclear. The burning tank dominated the space. Murphy continued to fire. Not continuously. In measured bursts. When ammunition ran low, he adjusted. He called an artillery support over the radio, his voice steady, despite the fire around him. Coordinates were given calmly. The field would not remain quiet. The sound of incoming artillery changed the situation. Explosions tore into the ground ahead. German movement slowed further. Then stopped. The 5 minutes ended not with a final shot, but with absence. The field emptied. When friendly forces began to move forward again, Murphy finally stepped down from the tank. His legs gave way. Only then did the effort become visible. The tank continued to burn behind him, unmoved by what had occurred. When the firing stopped, the field felt larger. The smoke thinned slowly. Sound returned in fragments. Murphy lay on the ground near the tank, his body unsteady. Others reached him cautiously. The area was not yet secure. He was wounded. That much was clear. Shrapnel had torn into his legs and arms. Blood soaked into his uniform unevenly. There was no urgency in his movements now. Only exhaustion. The tank continued to burn behind them. Flames flickered, then settled. The position that had nearly been abandoned was held. Not because the enemy had been destroyed, but because they had stopped moving forward. For Murphy's unit, this mattered. Time had been gained. Enough to regroup. Enough to stabilize the line. There was no immediate assessment of what had occurred. No tally. The field was checked. Weapons were collected. Orders resumed. Murphy was carried away from the front line. As he was moved, the tank remained where it had been. A burnt-out vehicle in a quiet field. To anyone arriving later, it would look like wreckage left behind by chance. There was nothing to suggest what had happened there minutes earlier. The war continued around the position. Other engagements drew attention away. Murphy did not return to the field that day. His role there had ended. The 5 minutes did not echo. They did not linger. They passed into routine. For those who remained, the burning tank became background. Another damaged machine in a long war. Murphy's injuries were treated away from the front. There was no immediate understanding of their extent. Only damage that needed attention. Shrapnel had embedded itself unevenly. Some fragments were removed quickly. Others were left where they were. Pain arrived later. Not all at once. The body reacted slowly, as it often does after sustained effort. Murphy did not speak much during treatment. There was little to describe. What had happened on the tank did not feel like a story. It felt like a sequence of actions that had already ended. He was not returned to his unit immediately. Recovery required time. The fighting continued without him. Positions changed. Lines shifted slightly. The field with the burning tank faded from relevance. Reports moved upward through command channels. Details were reduced. A tank. An advance delayed. An individual action. Nothing more. Murphy did not follow the progress of the war closely during this period. There was no sense of absence. He had done what the situation required. Then it had ended. Silence replaced the noise of the field. Days passed. When Murphy was able to move again, the war around him had already changed shape. New units had taken positions. New problems demanded attention. The 5 minutes were no longer present. They had been absorbed into the larger movement of the war. For Murphy, they remained unexamined. He did not revisit them in conversation. There was no need. They existed as something that had happened. Nothing more. What happened on the burning tank did not spread immediately. There was no announcement at the front line. No pause in operations to acknowledge it. The war moved forward, and the event followed behind it, slower. Reports were written later. They passed through several hands. Details were simplified. Time compressed. 5 minutes became a paragraph. A paragraph became a line. The burning tank was mentioned briefly. So was the delay it caused. Murphy's name appeared where it needed to. Attached to actions, not interpretation. There was no language about fear. No description of heat or smoke. Just facts. An individual held a position. Enemy movement was disrupted. Friendly forces regrouped. As the war continued, the report found its place among many others. Similar actions occurred elsewhere. Different terrain. Different names. This one was not unique in structure, only in circumstance. When recognition came, it arrived long after the field had been abandoned. By then, the tank no longer existed. The ground had changed. The event was separated from its setting. What remained was an account. Detached from cold, from noise, from uncertainty. Murphy did not shape how it was recorded. He was not present for that process. The story moved away from the person involved and into documentation. Over time, the account would be revisited, cited, summarized. But each retelling moved it further from the field itself. The 5 minutes remained unchanged, but the way they were understood did not. The field did not remember what happened there. After the fighting moved on, the ground returned to stillness. Tracks faded. Shell marks softened. The burnt-out tank remained for a time, then it did not. It was dismantled, cleared, replaced by empty space. No marker was left behind. The 5 minutes did not alter the shape of the war. They did not change borders. They did not end a campaign. They delayed an advance. Nothing more. But delay, in war, can matter. Not because it is dramatic, but because it allows time to pass. Time for movement. Time for regrouping. Time for survival. For Murphy, the event became something that existed outside of him. It was written down, referenced, but it was no longer lived. He did not return to that field. He did not stand on another burning tank. The war took him elsewhere, then released him. The 5 minutes remained behind. They did not echo. They did not ask to be remembered. They existed once, under fire, on hot metal, in smoke. Then they ended. What remained was not heroism, not spectacle. Only a brief interruption in the movement of a much larger war. A tank that should have been abandoned. A decision made without ceremony. 5 minutes that passed. And then, nothing more.